The father's justice. On my birthday, I typed in the family group chat, "I miss you all," and no one replied. My name is George Miller. I'm 66 years old, and this is how my birthday began. I've been living alone for the past 3 years, ever since my wife, Susan Miller, passed away. The house hasn't changed much. Her photos are still on the walls. Her chair is still by the window, but the silence feels different now, heavier, like it lingers in every corner. 7:30 inches the morning. I woke up the same way I always do. Soft light came through the kitchen window, pale and quiet. I moved slowly, out of habit, filled the kettle, made my coffee, added 2 sugars and a splash of cream, the same routine I've followed for decades. I carried the mug to the table where Susan and I used to sit together, and I placed my phone right beside it before taking the first sip. I checked the screen. Nothing. No calls, no messages, no notifications. 8:15. I checked again. Still nothing. I told myself it was early. Kevin was probably busy. Rachel had the kids. Brian had never been a morning person. I set the phone down, then picked it up again a few seconds later without thinking. 9:40. Still quiet. The house felt too still. Even the ticking of the wall clock sounded louder than usual, each second stretching longer than it should. 11:55. I opened the family group chat. 12 people, my children, their spouses, my grandchildren, old enough to have phones. Kevin, Rachel, Brian, Ashley, Ethan, Chloe. All their names lined up on the screen like they were close, like they still belonged to this house somehow. I stared at the message box for a while, typed something, deleted it, tried again. My fingers hesitated, like I was asking for something instead of simply saying it. Finally, I wrote, "I miss you all today." Then I added, "Hope everyone's doing well." I pressed send. 12:03. Message delivered. I set the phone down, but I didn't look away. 12:15. Kevin read it. 1:07. Rachel read it. 1:42. Brian read it. 2:10. Even Ethan read it. One by one, the read receipts appeared, quiet confirmations that they had seen me and chosen not to answer. I waited. 2:30. No reply. 3:05. Still nothing. At 3:40, my phone finally buzzed. My heart tightened. I picked it up immediately. Kevin. I opened the message. "We're on vacation, Dad. Don't be so dramatic." I read it once, then again, and again, as if the words might change if I stared at them long enough. But they didn't. Don't be so dramatic. I sat there, the phone still in my hand. Something inside my chest felt like it cracked just a little. Not because they forgot my birthday, but because missing them, reaching out to them, had somehow become a problem. 3:52. Another notification appeared. Kevin had posted a photo. I tapped it, and there it was. A bright beach, a table full of food, Kevin smiling behind dark sunglasses, Ashley beside him, a drink in his hand that probably cost more than a week of groceries. Rachel commented, "Looks amazing. Wish we were there." Brian reacted with a laughing emoji. Ethan hit like. They were all there, talking, reacting, sharing. Just not with me. I went back to the family group chat, looked at my message sitting there. "I miss you all today." No reply. 4:20. I was still at the table. 5:10. The light in the room started to fade. Kevin's words kept repeating in my head. "Don't be so dramatic." As if missing your children was something you weren't supposed to feel. I set the phone down, picked it up again, then set it down once more, not because I was waiting for a reply anymore, but because I couldn't understand why there wasn't one. I looked at their names again. My family. The people I had spent my entire life showing up for. And for the first time, something felt off in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. And sitting there, in that quiet kitchen, as the last light of the day disappeared, I started to wonder, had I really been forgotten, or had I simply become someone they could see, but no longer felt the need to answer? Kevin's message didn't disappear. It just stayed there, sitting on the screen like something I couldn't move past. "We're on vacation, Dad. Don't be so dramatic." I read it again, slower this time, paying attention to every word. Not the vacation part that made sense on its own. It was the second half that didn't sit right. "Don't be so dramatic." I said it quietly, just to hear how it sounded. The words felt out of place, like they didn't belong to the situation, or maybe they didn't belong to me. Dramatic. I leaned back slightly, still holding the phone, letting that word settle. Since when did missing your children become something exaggerated, something unnecessary? I hadn't accused anyone. I hadn't complained. I had written one sentence, one simple line. "I miss you all today." That was it. And somehow, that had turned into something that needed to be corrected. I stared at Kevin's message again, noticing how easy it must have been for him to type it. No hesitation, no second thought, just a quick response, sent and forgotten. Meanwhile, I had spent minutes deciding what to say, deleting, rewriting, trying to make sure it didn't sound like too much. Too much. The thought lingered longer than I expected. Had it always been like this, and I just didn't see it? I shifted in my seat and unlocked the phone again, scrolling through older messages, not looking for anything specific, just checking. There it was, a call from Kevin, 6 weeks ago, late evening. I remembered the tone immediately. Urgent, tight, almost anxious. He needed help, said his credit card was maxed out, said he didn't have time to explain everything. I didn't ask him to. I transferred the money within the hour. I remember sitting at this same table, watching the confirmation go through, telling myself that this is what fathers do. You don't question. You help. You show up when it matters. And now, I looked back at his message again. "We're on vacation." The two things didn't line up. Not cleanly. Not in a way that made sense. If things were that tight, if it was really an emergency, then how does a vacation fit into that picture? Flights, hotels, restaurants, none of that happens by accident. I didn't need proof. I didn't need to see anything else. The gap was already there. And for the first time, I didn't try to explain it away. I didn't tell myself there must be a reason. I just let the thought sit there, uncomfortable, unfinished. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment, almost opening the message again, but I stopped. I already knew what it said. Reading it again wouldn't change it. "Don't be so dramatic." I exhaled slowly and set the phone down, but the sentence stayed, repeating in the back of my mind. Not loud, not overwhelming, just constant, like something that had been there longer than I wanted to admit. And as I sat there, not responding, not reacting, just letting everything settle into place, I found myself asking a question that didn't have a quick answer. When did something as simple as missing my own children turn into something they felt the need to dismiss? And if this wasn't new, then what else had I been overlooking all this time? I didn't reply to Kevin. I just let the phone sit there for a while, screen dimming, then lighting up again when I touched it. The message stayed where it was, but my attention shifted somewhere else, to things I hadn't thought about in a long time. Not one moment, not one call, but a series of them, spaced out over months, maybe years. Rachel came to mind first. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember that much, because I had just come back from the hardware store. She called in the middle of the day, which she rarely did. Her voice sounded rushed, a little strained, said she needed help with groceries for the kids. Nothing big, just enough to get through the week. I didn't ask questions. I told her I'd take care of it. Within an hour, the money was in the account. She thanked me quickly, said she'd call later. But the call never came. I sat with that memory for a second. Then another one followed. Brian. Late evening. His number on the screen, back when I still picked up on the first ring. He said he was behind on a payment. Something about the car. Maybe rent. I don't remember the exact details, just the tone. frustrated, pressured, like time was running out. I told him not to worry, asked how much he needed, transferred it, before the conversation even had a proper ending. That one felt normal at the time. They all did. I shifted in my chair slightly, resting my hand on the edge of the table, tracing a small line in the wood without really noticing it. The memories didn't stop. They just kept lining up. Different days, different reasons, but the same structure. A call, an explanation, an urgency, a transfer, silence. I never thought of it as a pattern before. It didn't feel like one. It felt like being needed, like being useful, like I still had a place in their lives that mattered. But sitting there now, replaying it without interruption, it started to look different. There was always a reason. Always something unexpected, something that couldn't wait. And I was always the solution. Not part of the conversation, not someone they checked in with, just the answer to the problem. I tried to remember the last time one of them called without asking for something. Not a text, not a quick reply, a real call. One where the purpose wasn't already decided before they dialed. Nothing came up. I leaned back slightly, letting out a quiet breath. The room hadn't changed, but the way I was looking at things had. It wasn't just about Kevin anymore. It wasn't even about today. It was something that had been building, quietly, over time. And I had let it happen, without noticing. Susan's voice came back to me then, not loud, not sudden, just steady, the way she used to speak when she wanted me to think. Don't help too much, George. They'll get used to it. I remember brushing that off back then, telling her that family helps each other, that we were doing the right thing, that it would all balance out in the end. She never argued, just nodded, like she knew something I didn't. I stayed still for a moment, letting that memory settle where it needed to. Maybe she had seen it earlier. Maybe she had understood the difference between helping and making it too easy. My hand moved back to the phone, resting on it without unlocking the screen. For the first time, I wasn't sure anymore. Not about what I had been doing, not about what it meant. I had always believed I was supporting them, giving them stability, making sure they didn't fall too far when things got difficult. But now, sitting there, looking at the pattern laid out clearly in front of me, I wasn't certain I had been doing the right thing at all. And that thought stayed with me, just long enough for me to finally open the banking app. I unlocked the banking app slowly, not because it was difficult, but because I wasn't sure what I was about to confirm. The screen lit up in a soft glow against the dimming light in the room. I entered the password, waited a second, and the account opened. The joint account, the one I had set up years ago for family emergencies. The balance was still there, steady, familiar. But it wasn't the number that caught my attention. It was the transaction history just below it. I scrolled down. March 15, Kevin, $2,500. I remembered that call. Car trouble. Urgent. Couldn't wait. I tapped on the date, looking closer. Then I paused for a moment, reached for my phone again, and opened the browser. It didn't take long to find it. Kevin's social media, public, easy to scroll through. 2 days after that transfer, there it was. A photo. Green grass. A wide open course. Kevin is standing with a set of golf clubs, smiling in the sun, clean shirt, sunglasses, relaxed posture. No sign of stress, no sign of urgency, just a weekend that looked expensive and carefully planned. I stared at the screen a second longer than I needed to, then went back to the banking app. April 2, Rachel, $1,800. Groceries for the kids, that's what she said, just until things settled down. I didn't need to search long this time either. Her posts were still there. A restaurant table, polished wood, plates arranged neatly, glasses catching the light, multiple photos, different nights, different places. The kind of places you don't go when you're counting every dollar. The kind of places you don't visit if groceries are a problem. I scrolled through a few more images, then stopped. Went back to the account. May 20, Brian, $3,200. Something about his business is slowing down. Cash flow issues. Temporary. Just needed help to keep things running. I searched his name. Not as much there. No clear photos. No obvious answers. Just fragments. A new watch in one picture. A different car in another. Nothing direct, but enough to make the explanation feel incomplete. I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on the table as I continued scrolling through the account. The list didn't stop. Different amounts, different dates, same pattern. Small transfers, larger ones, all spaced out just enough to feel separate at the time, but together, laid out in a single line, they told a different story. I did the math without meaning to. 10,000, 20, more. The number climbed quietly, without drama, but it was enough to make me stop. I looked back up at the total balance, then down again at the transactions, letting the two sit side by side for a moment. This wasn't occasional help anymore. This was a system. I set the phone down for a second, then picked it up again, as if stepping away from it might change what I was seeing. It didn't. The numbers stayed the same. The dates didn't move. The pattern held. I went back to Kevin's photos, then Rachel's, then back again to the account. The comparison wasn't forced. It was obvious, clear enough that it didn't need explanation. They weren't struggling. They weren't behind. They weren't choosing between necessities and comfort. They were living their lives fully, comfortably, with money that had come from me. I sat back in the chair, the phone still in my hand, and let that realization settle without trying to soften it. For the first time, I didn't look for another explanation. I didn't tell myself there must be something I didn't understand. The thought came clearly, without resistance. They're not broke. They're spending my money. The room felt quieter than before, not because anything had changed, but because something had finally been said out loud, even if only to myself. I looked down at the account one more time, then locked the screen. My reflection appeared faintly on the glass for a brief second before it went dark. And sitting there, with everything laid out in front of me, in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. Another thought followed, quieter, but heavier. I'm not helping them. I'm funding them. I'm not supporting them. I'm solving everything for them, before they ever have to try. My grip on the phone tightened slightly before I set it down on the table, the sound soft but final. And in that moment, something shifted in a way that didn't feel temporary. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't unsure. I wasn't even questioning it. I understood it. And that understanding came with a realization that didn't need to be repeated, because it was already clear enough. I'm not their father. I'm their ATM. The words stayed with me, not loud, not overwhelming, just steady, as they had always been there, waiting for me to finally notice them. I didn't reach for the phone again. I didn't open the app. I didn't try to fix anything. I just sat there for a while, letting the silence settle into something different. And that night, I didn't call anyone. I didn't call anyone. I didn't send another message. I didn't try to explain what I had just seen. The phone stayed on the table, screen dark, as if it had nothing left to offer. The house was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, but the kind that gives you space to think longer than you want to. I moved slowly through the rooms without a clear purpose, turning on a light in the hallway, then turning it off again a few minutes later. The air felt still, like everything was waiting for something I hadn't decided yet. I ended up back in the living room, lowering myself into the chair near the window. Susan used to sit there in the evenings, reading, sometimes just watching the street outside, without saying much. I looked at the empty space beside it, then at the photograph on the shelf, the one from our 40th anniversary. She was smiling in it, steady, certain, the way she always was when she believed something mattered. Her voice came back to me slowly, not loud, not sudden, just clear enough to hear. Don't help too much, George. They'll get used to it. I remember how easily I dismissed that back then. I would smile, tell her we were just being good parents, that family supports each other, that things would balance out. She never argued. just looked at me for a second longer than usual, like she was waiting for me to see something on my own. I leaned forward slightly, resting my hands together, looking down at the floor. The memory didn't feel distant anymore. It felt close, like it had been sitting just beneath the surface this whole time. Maybe she had seen the difference earlier. The line between helping and making it too easy. I thought about each transfer, each call, each moment where I stepped in before anything had the chance to settle. I never gave them time to figure things out. I never asked them to. I solved the problem. Quickly. Quietly. Every time. At the time, it felt right. Necessary. Now, it looked different. Not wrong in intention, but wrong in effect. I wasn't just helping them through difficult moments. I was removing the difficulty altogether. I wasn't giving them support. I was taking on responsibility. And the more I did that, the less they had to rely on anything else, including themselves. I exhaled slowly, leaning back into the chair, letting the thought settle without pushing it away. The room had gone darker without me noticing. The last bit of light from outside barely reached the edge of the floor. I stayed there for a while, not checking the phone, not replaying the messages, just letting everything fall into place in a way it hadn't before. The pattern was clear now, not just in what they had done, but in what I had allowed. I had made it easy for them not to grow, easy for them not to think ahead, easy for them to call and expect the answer before they even asked the question. My hand rested on the arm of the chair, fingers still, as the realization settled into something firm, something that didn't shift when I looked at it from another angle. This wasn't going to fix itself. Not with time, not with another conversation, not with another transfer. If nothing changed, nothing would change. I sat up slightly, the decision forming without resistance this time. It didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel emotional. It felt necessary. Everything had to stop. Not gradually, not partially, not with conditions. Completely. I didn't reach for the phone yet. I didn't need to. The decision was already there, clear enough that it didn't require a second thought. I stood up, turned off the light in the room, and let the house fall back into silence. And the next morning, I called the bank. I woke up earlier than usual that morning, not because I had anywhere to be, but because the decision was already there, waiting. The house was still dim, the light outside just beginning to come through the windows. I moved through the kitchen the same way I always did, filled the kettle, made the coffee, but I didn't sit down right away. The phone was already in my hand before the cup touched the table. I stared at the screen for a moment, then opened the contacts and found the number. The bank had always been routine. Deposits, transfers, confirmations, nothing complicated. Nothing that required much thought. Until now. I pressed call. It rang twice before someone answered. A calm voice. Professional, steady. She introduced herself and asked how she could help. I gave my name, confirmed my details, and for a second, I hesitated. Not because I was unsure, but because I understood exactly what I was about to do. I need to make a change to my account, I said. My voice came out even quieter than I expected. Of course, sir. What kind of change? I glanced down at the table, at the faint mark where the wood had worn smooth over the years. Then I said it. I want to remove all access for every secondary user on the account. There was a short pause on the other end, just long enough to make it clear that this wasn't a common request. Sir, just to confirm, you'd like to remove all other authorized users from the account? Yes. Another pause. A slight shift in her tone. More careful this time. That would make the account solely under your name. Are you certain you'd like to proceed with that change? My hand tightened slightly around the phone. For a brief moment, I felt it. The hesitation trying to push its way back in. No doubt, just the weight of habit. Years of saying yes. Years of stepping in. Years of keeping things the same. But the decision was already made. I'm sure, I said. She asked a few more questions. Security checks, confirmations, routine steps that felt slower than they should have. I answered each one without rushing, my fingers resting lightly against the edge of the table. At one point, I noticed they were shaking, just a little. Not from fear, not exactly. More from the realization that something was ending, something that had been in place for a long time. The process took about 20 minutes. It didn't feel dramatic. No raised voices, no sudden changes, just a series of confirmations, one after another, until there was nothing left to adjust. All access has been removed, she said finally. The account is now solely in your name. I thanked her, ended the call, and set the phone down carefully. For a moment, I just sat there, looking at nothing in particular. The room was quiet, the same as it had been the day before. But it didn't feel the same. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It felt clear. I picked up the coffee, now slightly cooler than before, and took a sip. The taste hadn't changed, but something about it felt steadier, like I was noticing it more, instead of thinking past it. I didn't check the account again. I didn't open any messages. There was nothing left to confirm. The change had already been made. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked outside. The street was the same. Cars passing occasionally. A neighbor stepping out to check the mail. Nothing about the world had shifted, but inside the house, something had settled into place. It wasn't relief, not entirely, but it wasn't tension either. It was quiet in a different way. I moved through the rest of the day without rushing, cleaned a few things that didn't need cleaning, stepped outside for a while, came back in. The phone stayed where it was. I didn't feel the need to check it every few minutes anymore. By evening, the light had started to fade again, stretching across the floor just like the day before. I sat back down at the table, the same spot, the same view, but not the same feeling. The decision didn't feel temporary. It felt complete. And as the room slowly darkened, I glanced once at the phone, still silent, still untouched. And I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Because that night, the phone would start ringing. The phone rang just after sunset, a sharp sound cutting through the quiet room. I didn't reach for it right away. It rang again, then stopped, then started once more, a little longer this time. I glanced at the screen, Kevin. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, it rang again. Same name, same urgency. I watched it vibrate against the table, the light flickering with each pulse. Then, it stopped. Silence returned for a moment, before it broke again. This time, it wasn't Kevin. Rachel. I didn't answer that one either. The pattern didn't slow down after that. It picked up, one call after another, sometimes only seconds apart, sometimes overlapping, just enough that the screen didn't have time to go dark. Kevin. Rachel. Brian. Then Kevin again. By 9:30, I stopped counting. The phone kept moving slightly on the table with each vibration, shifting a fraction of an inch every time it lit up. I sat back in the chair, hands resting on my lap, watching it as if it belonged to someone else. At 10:12, the first message came through. Kevin. Dad, what's going on? My card just got declined. A second message followed before I even had time to process the first. I'm at dinner. Call me back. I didn't move. A few seconds later, another notification. Rachel. I just tried to withdraw money. It says insufficient funds. That's not possible. Something's wrong with the account. Her message was longer, more words, but the tone was the same. Confusion first, then urgency, then expectation. I picked up the phone then, not to answer, just to hold it. The screen kept lighting up in my hand, each message stacking on top of the last. Brian. Dad, I've got a payment due tomorrow. The transfer didn't go through. I need you to fix this. Not can you help, not are you okay, just a statement, a problem, waiting for me to solve it. The messages kept coming. Kevin again. This isn't funny. We're stuck here. Ashley's card is maxed out. You need to sort this out now. Rachel again. I have to buy things for the kids tomorrow. You can't just shut this off without telling us. Brian again. My car's going to get repossessed if this doesn't get fixed. Call me. I scrolled through them slowly, reading each one from top to bottom. The words changed slightly. The details shifted, but the core of it stayed the same. A problem. An expectation. A demand. I waited for something different to appear. Just one message that didn't follow that pattern. One line asked something else. Are you okay? Is everything all right? Why did you do this? Nothing. Not one of them asked. The screen reflected faintly against my face as I held it closer, reading through the messages again, just to be sure I hadn't missed it. I hadn't. The absence was clear enough. They weren't calling to check on me. They weren't reaching out to understand. They were reacting to something that had been taken away. I lowered the phone slightly, letting it rest in my hand as the next call came through. Kevin again. I watched his name appear, disappear, then appear again as another message came in right after. Dad, answer the phone. I didn't. The room stayed quiet except for the occasional vibration, each one shorter now, sharper, like the patience on the other end was running out. Outside, a car passed by, headlights sweeping briefly across the wall before fading again. Inside, nothing moved except the phone. By midnight, the calls slowed, not stopped, just spaced out more. Messages replaced them. Shorter now, more direct, less confusion, more frustration. I set the phone down on the table and let the screen go dark. For a while, I just sat there, listening to the silence return in pieces, filling the spaces between each missed call. The insight didn't arrive suddenly. It had already been there, building through every message I had read. They weren't worried about me. They weren't wondering why I had done it. They were trying to get something back. And without it, they didn't know what to do. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the last vibration fade without looking at the screen. I had read everything, every message, every demand. And for the first time, I didn't answer. The phone stayed on the table, quiet now, still, as it had finally run out of things to say. And sometime after midnight, the calls stopped completely. The house settled back into silence, steady, uninterrupted. I didn't check the messages again. I didn't open the screen. I didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to explain, not tonight. And as the room grew darker and the noise finally disappeared, I knew this wasn't over yet. Because the next morning, Kevin would call again. The phone rang again the next morning, earlier than the others had started the night before. I was already awake, standing in the kitchen. The light barely settled into the room. The screen lit up on the table. Kevin. I let it ring once, twice. Then, I picked it up. Hello? There was no pause on the other end. His voice came through immediately, tight, sharp, carrying more frustration than concern. Dad, what is going on? What did you do to the account? I didn't answer right away. I pulled the chair out slowly and sat down, the phone pressed lightly against my ear. You need to fix this, he continued. My card got declined last night. We had to leave the restaurant. Do you understand how that looks? I glanced down at the table, running my fingers along the edge without thinking. It's not just me, he added. Rachel can't get money out. Brian's calling me about his payments. You can't just shut everything off like that without telling anyone. The words came quickly, one after another, like he had been holding them in all night. Kevin, I said quietly. What? I let a second pass before I spoke again. When was the last time you called me, just to ask how I'm doing? There was a pause. Not long, but enough to break the rhythm of everything he had been saying. What does that have to do with anything? He replied, his tone shifting slightly, less certain now, but still defensive. It has everything to do with it. I leaned back in the chair, looking toward the window, the light growing stronger outside. When was the last time you called me, without needing something? Another pause, longer this time. I could hear faint movement on his end, maybe footsteps, maybe just silence filling the space. Dad, that's not fair, he said finally. We talk all the time. We don't talk, I replied. You call, You tell me what's wrong, and I fix it. That's what family does. Is it? I let the question sit there, not pushing it, not explaining it further. I could hear him exhale, a short breath through the phone. Look, whatever this is about, you're taking it too far, he said. If something upset you, you could have just said it. You don't shut everything down like this. You don't put people in this kind of situation. I looked down at my hand resting on the table, steady now. I didn't put you in that situation, I said. I just stepped out of it. There was a silence on the line, not empty, just unsettled. I've been alone in this house for 3 years, Kevin, I continued, my voice even. Since your mother passed, I wake up, I make coffee, I sit at this table, and most days the only reason the phone rings is because someone needs money. He didn't interrupt this time. I'm not saying that to blame you, I added. I'm saying it because it's true. The line stayed quiet. I don't need you to call me for money, I said. I don't need you to call me because something's wrong. I paused for a second, just long enough to make sure the next words came out clearly. I need you to call me because I'm your father. No response. I need to know that I still matter when there's no problem to solve. I could hear his breathing now, slower, less controlled than before. That's not, he started, then stopped. That's not how it is. Then tell me how it is. Another pause. This one lasted longer. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Not completely, but enough to notice. I didn't think about it like that, he said. I know. I mean, things just got busy. Work, everything else. It wasn't intentional. I'm not saying it was. The conversation slowed after that. The urgency that had been there at the start, the demand to fix it. It wasn't gone, but it wasn't leading anymore. I just didn't realize, he said, quieter now. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. That's the problem, I replied. We sat in that silence together for a moment. Not as long as the ones before, but different. Less tense, more uncertain. I'm not asking you for money, he said finally. I just need to understand what you want from us. I looked toward the window again, the morning light now fully inside the room. I want my family, I said. Not the version that shows up when something's wrong. The one that stays when nothing is. Another pause. This one didn't feel empty. It felt like something was shifting, slowly, carefully, like he was seeing something from a different angle for the first time. Okay, he said, almost to himself. Okay, I hear you. I didn't respond to that. There wasn't anything to add. The call didn't end right away, but it didn't continue either. It just settled. After a few more seconds, he cleared his throat. I'll call you later, he said. All right. The line went quiet. I lowered the phone and set it back on the table, the screen fading to black again. The room felt the same, but not exactly the same. Something had been said, something that couldn't be taken back or ignored. And 3 days later, Kevin was standing at my front door. Kevin didn't call again that day, or the next. 3 days later, I heard a car pull into the driveway just after mid-morning. The engine shut off, then the sound of a door closing harder than it needed to. I was in the kitchen when I saw him through the window, standing there for a second before walking up to the door. I didn't rush. I wiped my hands on a towel, set it down, then walked over and opened it. He looked different up close, not in a way I could point to immediately, but enough to notice, less certain maybe. Hey, he said. Come in. He stepped inside, glancing around the room as if he hadn't been there in a while, which he hadn't. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he walked toward the table and sat down without asking, his hands resting flat against the surface. I've been thinking about what you said, he began. His voice wasn't sharp this time, just steady, slower than before, about everything. I took the chair across from him, keeping my posture relaxed, not pushing the conversation forward. I didn't realize how it looked, he said, or how it felt, from your side. I nodded slightly, letting him continue. I'm not saying I got it all figured out, he added, looking down for a moment. But I get it more than I did. There wasn't an apology in the usual sense. No long explanation, just an acknowledgement that something had been off. "We got used to it," he said quietly. "You always said yes, so we stopped thinking about it." I didn't interrupt. "We didn't think about what it meant to you," he went on. "We just expected it." The room stayed quiet for a moment after that. Not tense, just still. At the same time, things weren't settling the same way everywhere else. Rachel sent one message, short, direct. "I hope you're satisfied." Nothing after that. No follow-up, no call. Her name stopped appearing on my screen entirely after that day. Brian showed up once, late in the evening. I heard him before I saw him, the uneven rhythm of his steps on the porch. When I opened the door, the smell of alcohol came with him. "You think this fixes anything?" he said, his voice louder than it needed to be. "You cut us off, and now everything's supposed to be fine?" I stood there, not moving, letting him finish. "My car's gone," he added, pointing vaguely behind him. "You know that? Because of this." I didn't argue. There wasn't anything to argue about. "Brian," I said, keeping my tone even, "you're not losing anything that was ever mine to carry." He shook his head, muttered something under his breath, then turned and walked away before I could say anything else. That was the last time I saw him. A week later, someone else came by. "Ethan." He knocked lightly, hands in his pockets, when I opened the door. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, a little unsure at first. "Come in." He stepped inside, looking around the same way Kevin had, but with a different kind of attention, like he was actually seeing things. "I heard what happened," he said after a moment. I nodded. "I think you did the right thing." I looked at him, not expecting that. "My mom's been doing this for a long time," he added. "Not just now, for years." He said it plainly. No hesitation, no attempt to soften it. "She talks about it sometimes," he went on. "Not directly, but enough." I leaned back slightly, letting that settle. "I didn't like it," he said. "I just didn't know how to say anything." We sat there for a while after that, talking. Not about money, not about problems, just about things that hadn't come up in a long time. His classes, the work he was doing, plans he hadn't shared before. Before he left, he paused at the door. "I want to come by again," he said. "If that's okay." "It is." Later that afternoon, Chloe came with Kevin. She didn't hesitate the way the others had. She walked straight into the room, looking around with open curiosity, then stopped near the table. "Is this where you sit?" she asked. "Most days." She nodded, then moved closer, placing her hands on the edge of the table the same way I often did. "It's nice," she said. It was a simple comment, but it didn't feel small. She didn't ask about the account. She didn't mention anything that had happened. She just stayed, present, asking questions about things in the room, about pictures on the wall, about Susan. And for the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel empty when someone else was in it. By the end of that week, it had become clear in a way that didn't need explanation. Some people stepped closer. Some stepped away, and some revealed exactly where they had been standing all along. I didn't try to pull anyone back. I didn't reach out to fill the silence where it had settled. I just paid attention to who was still there when nothing was being given. And slowly, without forcing it, one thing became certain. The ones who truly cared stayed. The rest didn't. And a few months later, things began to change. A year passed. Not quickly, not slowly. Just enough time for things to settle into something different. When my next birthday came around, I woke up the same way I always did. 7:30. The same light through the kitchen window. The same quiet house. But it didn't feel the same. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was steady, like it belonged there. I made my coffee, 2 sugars, a splash of cream, and sat at the table. The phone was beside me again, just like last year. But this time, I didn't reach for it right away. I took a sip first, let the morning sit for a moment. Then the screen lit up. A message. "Ethan, happy birthday, Grandpa. I'll come by later. I got something I want to show you." I read it once, then set the phone down for a second, not because I didn't believe it, but because I wanted to feel it land properly. It was simple, no urgency, no explanation, just a message that existed on its own. A few minutes later, another one came through. Kevin, happy birthday, Dad. I was thinking about you this morning. Can we have dinner tonight? I leaned back slightly, looking at the screen a little longer than I needed to. The wording was different now. No rush, no demand, no problem waiting behind it. Just a question, one that didn't require anything from me except an answer. Of course, I typed back. That afternoon, Ethan showed up first. He knocked once, then stepped in with a small box in his hands. I made this, he said, setting it on the table. Inside was a simple wooden frame, not perfect, but carefully put together. A photo sat inside it, one he had taken the week before, the two of us in the garden, standing next to the tomato plants. I figured you didn't have many pictures of yourself here, he said. I nodded, running my hand lightly along the edge of the frame. Thank you. Later that evening, Kevin arrived with Chloe. She walked in ahead of him, holding a small bag, her steps light across the floor. I helped pick this, she said, handing it to me. Inside was a book, something simple, something I would actually read. We didn't use your account, Kevin added quietly, standing just behind her. We're handling things ourselves now. I looked at him for a second, not surprised, just noticing the difference. I'm setting something up for Chloe, he continued. Savings, school, things like that. I want her to grow up understanding how it works, not just expecting it to be there. I nodded once. That's good. We didn't talk about the past directly. We didn't need to. It was already there, shaped into something we both understood. Brian called later that week, his voice clearer than it had been before. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't explain everything either, just said he was working on things, taking responsibility where he hadn't before. It wasn't complete, but it was a start. Rachel stayed distant. A message here and there, formal, short, without much behind it. I didn't push. Some distances don't close just because you want them to. As for me, my days changed in small ways that added up over time. I still woke up at the same hour, still made the same coffee, still sat at the same table, but I stopped waiting. I stopped checking the phone for something that might not come. I started doing things because I wanted to, not because I was filling space, working in the garden, fixing things around the house, taking walks, without thinking about who might call next. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like mine again. And somewhere along the way, I understood something that hadn't been clear before. Not completely. Love isn't measured by how much you give. And giving, without limits, doesn't always build connection. Sometimes, it replaces it. If you solve everything for someone, they stop learning how to stand on their own. If you make yourself available for every problem, you become part of the solution, but not part of their life. And if you don't draw a line, no one else will. I sat at the table that night, the new frame still in front of me, the photo catching the light just enough to stand out against everything else. For the first time in a long time, nothing felt unfinished. If you've ever been remembered only when someone needed something, then you already know what that feels like. Leave a dot in the comments, just a single, so I know I'm not the only one who's been there. And if this story meant something to you, follow along. There are more stories like this, ones that don't end the way you expect, but show you what actually matters. Because at the end of all of it, you have to decide for yourself what you're really holding on to, your money, or the people who only remember you when they need it.